What is the best lighting setup for an expert or a coach who wants to speak to their audience, either live online or they want to make their own recordings in their home studio? Now, this is a great question, and I'm sure that if you're not asking that question, someone you know who is an expert or a coach is probably asking that question because it comes up a lot. The thing is, this is not really a lighting question, and I'll explain why as I go through this. And the reason why a good person to explain this is I've got many decades now under my belt as a professional photographer. I studied photography for a number of years and actually practiced, and I covered a lot of different photographic disciplines. But much of my time was spent photographing people, CEOs, builders of businesses, and people who are really at the forefront of what we would call the experts economy. And having photographed so many people in that genre, I learned exactly what it takes to look good. And combined with my years of teaching and specifically corporate teaching live online, which I've been doing since 2012, that puts me in a great position to understand what helps a person to get the best when you're trying to create lighting for a live online or pre-recorded in your home studio experience. Now, instead of asking sort of what is the best lighting, what you should be really asking is what is the lighting that I need to help me create my signature look, which speaks from my brand identity. That's really the concept that I want you to start thinking about. So if you get nothing else out of this short conversation, I want you to get that is think about your lighting as being a part of your branded experience. And this is exactly how photographers or light or art directors for movies or television, this is how they approach lighting. It's not a technical question. It's a question about alignment between your brand, your message, or to wrap this up in a nice little bundle, your story. That's essentially what we're talking about here. And I've been in meetings or in trainings where an expert, very often an expert in marketing, would get the question where someone would ask them essentially, does the lighting, does the camera, does the microphone that I use really matter when it comes to speaking to my audience and putting messages out there for marketing for my business? And you'd be surprised the number of times that the marketing expert would come back and say, well, everything else pretty much matters. Your message matters, but the camera doesn't matter. The lighting doesn't matter. And they would often say that whilst they're on a camera that they've chosen and they're using lighting and a great microphone that they've also chosen because they understand their audience. And I want to just say to you, as I cover more about that later on in this series, this is a series of conversations. This is not just one conversation today. This is a series of conversations about this very concept of how we can look good, sound great online in front of our audience, but more importantly, how we can speak the language that our audience really needs to hear. And so essentially when we say what is the best lighting, just by asking that question, we're missing or overlooking the core purpose of lighting. Now, my experts, my coaches, they understand this within their own disciplines. They know that nuance matters, and they know that when it comes down to it, the difference is the difference between what that coach knows or what they've done over many, many years that sets them apart. When they are speaking to their audience, that's what they emphasize. They know the difference between that and a coach that is not going to be able to help their client to get that result. And that's really what we're talking about today. It's that nuance. Understanding that your lighting is every bit as important when it comes to your communication to your audience as your choice of logo, your choice of colors, your font. All of that matters. And it all needs to align with your marketing message. And we know this. We've seen this for many years in the biggest and most successful brands. They get all of this to kind of work together, not by accident. They do this by design and by intention. Now, this is quite funny for me anyway. You might not find it as funny, but I was in a conversation which was an online meeting, and we started to share with each other what it was that we did. And when I got on to explaining what I did, one of the meeting attendees mentioned that they really wouldn't want their lighting to look like my lighting, because they didn't want to look like someone who was maybe a newsreader. That was the description that they gave it. And I thought, yeah, that's great. I'm taking no offense, by the way, because I wanted to really acknowledge that what they had said was telling me that my lighting was what I was going for. I wanted to come across in my lighting as a person who is engaged in delivering factual and useful and important information. And the reason why I've chosen that is because I've studied over many years why we listen to people, why we enjoy receiving information from people who look a particular way when they are online. And again, I'll cover this a little bit more as we go through this series. But when we look at lighting, we have to remember that lighting is more than just about the technical. It's more than even the creative. Because when lighting is carefully and intentionally used, we can see how that lighting shapes and helps our clients to understand who we are. It helps to shape their perception. And that's just using the fact that we have been exposed to lighting, no pun intended, for many, many years. And we've understood that a particular type of lighting suggests that we're getting factual information. Another type of lighting suggests it's all fantasy and entertainment. And this is important for us. If we don't understand this connection, we could in our messaging be saying something really important, factual to our clients, but our lighting is saying something else and drawing them into a completely different genre of information. Lighting is not just about visibility. It's an important storytelling tool that is either reinforcing what you're saying or it's telling the opposite story to your client. And you may be wondering, why are people not taking my presentations seriously? Well, it could have a lot to do with your lighting. So let's talk about the idea of visual storytelling in lighting. Well, visual storytelling, we often tend to think it's to do with movies or television. And yes, you'd be right. If we go to someone like maybe a George Lucas or a Steven Spielberg, who has spent many years crafting stories and using great lighting, of course, great cinema, but one of the most important aspects is the great lighting. And they use this lighting to create a new dimension for us when we're going into this story, so that we become more involved in the story. We journey with the characters. The lighting is used to direct the audience's focus and to ensure and to confirm to the audience that you are indeed on an alien planet, if that's the case. Or we're in the Midwest and we have the right kind of lighting, even though many of those scenes would have been shot in a studio. And it's understanding that our audience journeys with us through a story. When we are speaking, we should be speaking our brand story and telling people why we exist, what are we here to do. And we want to bring our audience into that story with a congruent lighting to what our story is all about. So lighting should always be intentionally crafted to tell our unique story and to amplify our brand essence. So when we're thinking of aligning this lighting to our brand identity, I want you to really start to think about different lighting styles that you might have heard of, whether you've heard of cinematic lighting or whether you're talking about what we call clamshell lighting. None of that really matters in the grand scheme of things if it's not supporting the story. If it's not helping you to tell the story, then it doesn't matter what lighting you use, really. And I wanted, for those of you who have seen the film The Matrix, just think about how important that greenish lighting was, and to use lights that conveyed that greenish tone to connect us back to some of those monitors that were black with green text on it. And a lot of that is really intentional in the movie to keep us in that context, in that genre, in that story. So as experts, you are the brand. As coaches, you are the brand. And so you need to be telling your brand story, and your light needs to be aligned with you telling that story, because if it's not, it will expose the mismatch. Again, no pun intended. I want you as a viewer, as a person who's looking at other movies, to start to reflect on and pick out those core messages and how the lighting aligns with it, and why something might feel off in a movie. It's because some of these things are not aligned together. Maybe the dialogue is saying one thing and the scene is saying a completely different thing, and then the lighting is saying something else. And all of these are working against each other. But that's not what I want for you to start doing. So which lighting is the best for you as a coach or an expert? The lighting that is representing your brand story and helping you to share that brand story to your clients. And so very quickly on to the idea of creating your signature lighting. Now, let's be realistic here. I'm not going to be able in this short time to help you to craft your signature lighting. This is a little bit more of the questions you need to be asking before you start to craft and create or buy any lights or start measuring up studio space. The first thing is I want you to think about consistency. We've talked about your story, we've talked about congruency, but this is now what we call consistency. When we're doing anything in marketing, we have a consistent approach around speaking to our audience. So this is where we start talking about who is our audience. Before I know what lighting to use, I need to know what my audience is used to. I need to know what my audience expects, because my signature lighting needs to speak to my audience. And so we need to look them up, understand them. And as many coaches and experts, yes, we do know our audience, but how well do we know our audience is the question. Have we truly invested the time to understand what resonates with our audience? You know, if we could understand the kind of films that they watch, the programming that they watch, we could use that along with demographic and psychographic information to really clearly understand our audience and to know what matters to them. So that's really the first thing that we should be doing, is understanding our audience and making sure that what we're creating as a scene in terms of lighting is going to speak to that audience, not turn them away. And so this is why it's important, if your brand is a very bright and punchy brand, that you use the kind of lighting that is going to associate with that brand. If your brand is saying that, you know, we are more established, we're a little bit more mature, grown up, then you want to maybe get lighting which is a little bit more traditional and muted, because that's what your audience is probably going to be connected with. So consistency is running all the way through a consistent message, a consistent thread, a consistent lighting even. Every time you present, you're going to be using that lighting, because consistency is what creates that brand recognition and that trust, which is visually earned because you have showed up like that all the time. So your clients get used to it and they see you and they resonate with you, and you're reinforcing all the time that you understand that the lighting that you use is something that matters to your audience. They care about it, and you're going to create that lighting for them so that they feel your light. They feel part of your energy. So let's quickly just clarify how, as a coach or as an expert, this is of use to you. The first thing that I want to really stress here is that you don't need to become a lighting expert. You just need someone to help you along a journey so that you can understand enough about lighting to realize what types of light are going to work for you and what types of light are not going to work for you. Because remember, it's not about what you like, it's about what your audience likes. Remember that. That's the rule of brand and advertising, storytelling. It's what your audience likes. And if you create what they don't like, guess what? They'll go and find someone else who they can connect with, who understands them. Because it's not about them understanding you, it's about you and me understanding our audience. And I want you to just think for a second about any iconic photograph that you can think of over the years. And for many of us, you know, myself included, I want you to go and look at something that well predates me and will predate most of my audience. But there's Dorothea Lange, a great American photographer who is famously associated with something called the Dust Bowl. So if you just go and look those up, it happened during the Great Depression. And through great photographs, she was able to bring to the attention of government and help create change of the people who were suffering as a result of the Great Depression. So when we talk about photographs having power, okay, they might not have the unique place that they held once in a society without television and without the internet, but photographs still have amazing power to shape and to change the reality of the world when people become aware of the power of the image. And so Dorothea Lange helped to push a lot of reforms and change as a result of those great photographs that were taken during that time. So let me ask you, expert, let me ask you now, coach, how will your lighting, your specific lighting, tell your story and embody your brand? So if I ask myself that question, it will be, how will my lighting tell my story and embody my brand? In other words, what will your story do for your audience? I want you to think about that. And perhaps put that in the comments just to let me know that we're on the same page, that this resonates with you, that this is something that you find valuable. If you found this valuable, there's more coming along very soon. But I also want to cue you up for something which is coming, which will be on the 21st of July. And I'll be hosting an event which will be live. You can come and ask me questions because there's just not enough time to go into the detail here. But I look forward to seeing you at that event, and I will put a link in the chat for you. If you love what you're hearing, please remember to like, subscribe, and just carry on with the conversation. You never know what is going to be said and when. That's going to help you to actually connect with your audience through your lighting in the way that you've always wanted to do. I'm Patrick Nairn, and it's a pleasure to share this with you. And I want to just quickly say that I appreciate you spending the time to either watch this, whether you're watching it once or multiple times. Thank you very much. You could be doing many, many different things, and I'm ever so grateful that you have given me the time. But until then, I would want to say thank you, and I leave you in peace. See you then.